So good evening. So we'll today have a small session on answer writing in political science and international relations. Now, there are a lot of students who don't approach this aspect of the preparation in a serious way. Okay, a lot of students consider preparation of general studies and preparation of optional as something which is similar, completion of syllabus, whether we have secured notes for all the topics or not. Okay, so have we finished with the coaching formality or not? This is what we usually concentrate on normally. But what I have realized from my personal experience, that even after finishing off with coaching, the entire coaching program, by the time you are exam ready, there is a small journey that you will have to undertake. So between finishing off your coaching and getting exam ready, okay, there is a lot of distance that we require to cover. And what is it that we require to do during this time? We are required to ensure that the knowledge that we have acquired as a part of coaching is properly stabilized. Okay. Now, what happens is that a lot of students tend to read and update current events, but they don't really target the exam. You are acquiring knowledge. Are you targeting the exam? How many answers you practiced, Praneeth, in the last 2 years? Have you practiced writing answers? Optional or general studies? Okay. Not much, huh? Not much, but you know that this is very critical, isn't it? It's very critical. Now, how do we approach optional? Now, please remember that as far as GS is concerned, the syllabus that we have is very sketchy. Right, but as far as optional is concerned, the syllabus is detailed. Syllabus has a boundary. Of course, there are going to be incidental areas, there is no doubt about that. But syllabus is more rounded, syllabus is more detailed as far as the optional is concerned. Okay, that's not the case in GS. So there might be instances when in general studies, you might encounter questions which suddenly appear out of the blue. But for optional, let me say for at least 80% of the question paper, you can guess. Because it's a part of the syllabus only, isn't it? Only 1 or 2 questions you find them outside the syllabus. But the rest of the questions are from the syllabus, from within the syllabus only. Koncham atu itu twists istademo gaani, but the majority of the questions that you see in optional are from the syllabus. Therefore, optional preparation can be more definitive, can be more purposeful. Optional preparation compared to GS. GS is, you're always guessing, you don't know from where the question can come. But in optional, you know, well, this is the syllabus, we require to complete the syllabus, we require to do it in a scientific way, cover all the incidental areas. Okay. So preparation for the optional is a little more certain. There is an element of certainty as far as optional is concerned. Therefore, it is important for us to consider that optional is an opportunity where you can gain complete expertise on the entire syllabus, okay, where you can score, where you can expect questions, right, where you can identify topics, where you can actually identify proper material. Okay. So completion of syllabus is there, it's possible. After some point of time, you can say that you have completed the syllabus as far as your optional is concerned. Okay. So consider the preparation for optional as an opportunity for you to be a little more certain in your preparation. Okay. Now, as an aspirant myself, I have taken nearly 3 attempts before I cleared my mains and I could go to the interview. Okay. Now, the 3 times that I have taken my mains, I have never practiced answers writing. I have never done that. I never thought that it was necessary for me to practice answer writing. I went to the interview in 2004 and 2007. Before 2004, 3 years I have taken my mains continuously, but I did not clear the mains at all. Okay. One of my friends suggested me just to write an answer and just see the answer for yourself. Self-evaluate your answer. He asked me to evaluate the answer myself. I randomly picked up a question and I tried attempting an answer. When I looked at my answer, to my surprise, I found that I was completely way off the target. The direction of the question was in one way, my answer was completely in another direction. Okay, so I did not address the question. After having written mains 3 times, I realized that I was lacking very seriously in presenting my answer to the examiner. That was the experience that I personally had, and that was a very telling realization for me. It was then that I realized that we required to practice writing answers. Okay, we required to properly understand the question first, interpret the question properly. We required to practice writing answers. That's the first thing that I realized. I even saw this among with other students as well. Okay, there was one student of mine who had taken political science as an optional, and she had actually taken coaching at Delhi. She was doing her research at Delhi, at JNU in Delhi, in political science. She was attempting civil services examination, and she was taking her mains. She did not clear the mains 3 times. This was her last attempt. Somebody gave a reference and she came and met me when she was here at Hyderabad. I just asked her to write a script and bring it to me. When I looked at the script, I realized that she was full of knowledge. She was almost a scholar in political science. Of course, she was a scholar, isn't it? She was pursuing her PhD, she's a scholar. She was full of knowledge in political science, but she was not actually addressing the question. She just wrote whatever she knew. Okay? And I told her that the answer is very complicated. This kind of an answer maybe is good for academics, but not for civil services. For civil services, your answer required to be more pointed. Your answer requires to address the question straight away. Your answer requires to qualify with the requirements of the examiner for this scheme, isn't it? UPSC had made it very clear that answers that we write should be having features like brevity, clarity, and simplicity. 3 things. Brevity. The answer should be brief, isn't it? Clarity. There should be clarity of thought. It means your answer should be well organized. And there should be simplicity in your answers. Brevity, clarity, and simplicity will be awarded with a premium. This was what UPSC had declared. You know. So it means that this type of an examination requires candidates to present answers in a distinct way, in a special way, which sometimes goes missing in the answer scripts. In their, in their anxiety to write very well, students tend to put a lot of information, most of which is irrelevant for the answer, in the answer. And that's where, we find it a little more difficult when we are writing answers. That's the problem that I face. That's the problem that I've seen in a good number of students. Students have studied well. Students have had a lot of content with them. And students have tried to put their answers in the perfect way, giving all that they had in the form of information or content in their answers, which is not required. Okay? We are required to go just the distance the UPSC wants us to go. Brevity, clarity, and simplicity. This is the mantra as far as civil services answer writing is concerned. Okay? First. Now coming down to political science. Now in political science, questions appear in the examination which are more or less open-ended. When you look at the question paper, you see so many questions having the tag comment. When I was looking at the past papers, I've seen 4 questions at a stretch, all the questions asking the candidates to comment. It means that as far as political science is concerned, students have more freedom. Students have more freedom in drafting an answer. Okay? Unlike some other options which are slightly technical. For example, you have geography, for instance. When you're asked to, make a comparison between continental drift theory and ocean floor spreading, okay, there are evidences for that, there are evidences for this, you can compare, okay. There is not much of a freedom that you can exercise for an option like that. But for an option like political science, you have more freedom. And you know that each student is likely to interpret the question in his own way. Question can have a direction. One question can interpret it in one way, other student can interpret it in another way. Isn't it? You have this freedom. You have this freedom to understand the question the way you want to understand it, and also to frame the answer the way you want to frame it. Now this freedom entrusts us with a responsibility as far as political science is concerned. I am speaking about political science specifically. You have a responsibility to be more balanced, to be more objective in your answer. Okay? So what you require in political science is that you require to have a balance. You require to be objective. You require to have clarity of thought. Because political science gives students a lot of freedom in formulating their answers, and in a good number of questions you find tags like comment. Okay? It means that the examiner is actually asking your opinion or your viewpoint on that particular question. Okay? So here, as I told you, that freedom gives us a responsibility. Okay? So you are supposed to have proper clarity on concepts. A lot of students miss out on this simple fact. Okay? You require to have a lot of clarity. You know, there are some things which are very easily and simply understood, isn't it? For example, when Karl Marx says that your existence, your material existence gives you the right kind of consciousness, and every other consciousness that you have is only false consciousness. And a man's material existence is central and the core of what he is. His being is at the core of what he is. This is what Karl Marx says, isn't it? It simply means that our existence is linked to our material conditions in every way. Right? For example, what will happen if you convert into another religion? Will you die? You won't die. What happens if you simply get yourself in another caste? You don't die. What happens if you pick up the citizenship of America? Do you die? You don't die. Isn't it? All these are not central to your existence. But if you don't have food, you die, isn't it? This is central to a man's existence. His material conditions is central to a man's existence. You know, if you can boil down the concepts to their simplistic aspect, you get clarity. That kind of clarity is required to be produced by students for political science. This is important because political science gives you a lot of freedom. The more the freedom, the more responsible you are supposed to be in interpreting the questions, in analyzing, in coming out with balanced judgments, okay, and in the way you understand and present your jargon. This is one aspect of political science, right? Secondly, political science is a subject which is very interdisciplinary, right? Now, I think I told you once in the class, if you remember, if you ask me to describe the present scheme of the civil services examination, only two things strike very clearly to me. First is that the examination is interdisciplinary, and secondly, the examination is contemporary, very contemporaneous, right? With a very, very strong focus or emphasis on current events or contemporary events, isn't it? So, examination is interdisciplinary and it's also contemporaneous. Political science also shows the same kind of a bent, okay? So, political science candidate who is writing an answer, particularly if he is writing answers for section B in paper 1 and paper 2, he can be more interdisciplinary, and that's the reason why you have history, you have economics, and you have a lot of things as a part of section B, isn't it? Right. Next, third. See, what is very important for a student who wants to write good answers in political science is that he should be able to get the big picture. He should be able to get the big picture, right? That's very important. Our knowledge should not be in the form of islands, okay? We should be able to properly connect the dots and get the big picture, okay? That is very, very important. Now, when we look at the past, some of the past question papers, what we see is that candidates require to have a big picture while writing some answers. For example, there was this question that I had come across a few days back. The question was like this: trace the evolution of political thought from the ancient to the contemporary times. Trace the evolution of political thought from the ancient to the contemporary times. For 20 marks, this question was asked. Okay? It simply means that a candidate requires to have the big picture first. Ancient period lo etla undi political thought overall ga, medieval period lo etla undi, modern period etla undi. A big picture kavali candidates ki. Manam general ga em chestamante, we tend to study ancient Greek political thought, then features enti. We start off with Plato, Aristotle, Machiavelli, you know. We are not getting the big picture, isn't it? We are looking at the individual thinkers. But questions were like that. Not only for political thought, even for international relations also, the candidate should get the big picture. That's the reason why in the class we started with the Treaty of Westphalia. We looked at how the state system had evolved. We looked at what were the conditions that led to the strategic doctrine of balance of power. We looked at the First World War, the Second World War, the interwar period, the Great Depression, how it had affected international relations, the formation of League of Nations, collective security. The entire story, the entire big picture should be there in your mind for writing good answers. Okay? Right? So that is another thing that you have to keep in mind as far as political science is concerned. You know, for several other subjects, you can afford to have knowledge in the form of bits and pieces. Okay? But for a subject like political science, you require to have the big picture in mind. Okay? The clarity about the entire thing. Okay? For example, when we started with political thought also, we started with the classical period in the ancient Greek times. And then we looked at the medieval period and how events and what thought processes had shaped, what was the nature of society, why was man stifled, and then we looked at the modern period, isn't it? So that big picture should be there as a part of your core knowledge, okay, if you are preparing with political science. Okay. Next, after looking at this, now we'll see why answer writing is important, okay, and how does it help us. First, practicing writing answers, you know, it helps the students to understand the nature, the standard and the drift of the questions. Okay. So, to what extent should we prepare, to what standards we should prepare, in what direction the questions can be asked, okay, and how do we interpret the drift of the question. To have a proper understanding of all this, it is very important for candidates to practice writing answers. Okay. So, first is it helps the students to understand the standard, the nature, the drift of the questions. All these can be properly understood by practicing writing answers. Okay. Second, obviously you know that so many times you might have realized that clarity on a specific topic comes after 3 or 4 readings, isn't it? అదే కాకుండా ఒకసారి ఆ టాపిక్ సంబంధించిన ఒక క్వశ్చన్ తీసుకుని ఇఫ్ యూ అటెంప్ట్ ప్రాక్టీసింగ్ అన్ ఆన్సర్, the clarity you get is slightly different. It helps you to understand the subject better. So it's very important for candidates to practice answer writing. Okay. And thirdly, of course, it also helps you to test your knowledge and see whether you're up to it or not, whether your standard is able to match up with the standards required by civil services or not. Okay. So it's the best way to test yourself, and of course it's also going to be helpful for you in getting your scripts evaluated, okay, by somebody who knows, and to overcome any kind of inadequacies, whether it is in content or in presentation or in analysis or in drawing conclusions or in being balanced in every respect. Where are the shortcomings that you might have? You know, you can overcome all those shortcomings by, you know, practicing writing answers. So this is what we are supposed to keep in mind, right? Now there are a lot of hows on, you know, practicing writing answers. How do you practice writing answers? What do you do to practice writing answers? First, you know, you can start writing answers for previous year's questions. Okay, right? Right. Right. So, after practicing answer writing, right, by looking at the previous year's question papers, you can compare your answers. Just in case you are in self-help, there are always the notes of some toppers available, right, model answers of toppers available. You can compare your answers with those of the toppers for evaluation, in case you don't have any means to get your answers evaluated. Okay. Right. And next, practicing writing answers should be in an exam simulated condition only. You should subject yourself to the same level of conditions that you might normally encounter in an actual examination, right? So when you're planning to write an answer, ensure that you stick to the time limit, you stick to the word limit, and you stick to all other conditions which you might be subjected to in actual examination. So it should be an exam simulated condition that you should practice writing answers. Okay, right. Then next, you have to get your scripts evaluated by somebody who has experience in the subject, and you should take the feedback, right? You should take the feedback. And next, whatever are the kind of suggestions or leads that you have secured through the feedback, you got to work on them. You got to work on those leads and the feedback, and you got to make improvements. Okay, you got to make amendments to your answers and make improvements. Sometimes students might be faltering in organizing their answers properly or organizing their thought properly, right? It's only when you write answers that you'll realize where there are lacunae in your answers. Okay, obviously, as I told you, I was very confident about myself and my ability or skill to write answers. It was only when I had first written my script that I understood that I was very seriously lacking in this. Okay, so when you write the first script, you had written some scripts, you told me already. So what was your experience? Were there any difficulties which you had faced while writing your script, first script? Did you face any difficulties practically, honestly, seriously? Tell me, what were the kind of difficulties you faced?
Framing the answer, like the structure of the answer.
Structuring, you found it difficult to structure. Okay.
And thinking which content to add and which content not to add, so
Okay.
to keep up with the word limit.
Okay. So you had an excess of content. Sometimes.
No content as well.
Okay, right. Yeah. You have different kinds of emotions, right, for different questions, you know that. Okay. So tell me, how did you approach the question? Did you look at the keywords of the question?
Yeah.
Candidates tend to have their own practice, some students tend to underline the keywords, some students tend to, circle the keywords, right? People do a lot of things there, right? So first, understanding the keywords in the question is the most important aspect. Okay, it's not just like that examiner gives all these different words, isn't it? Okay, so he uses a term like evaluate. So tell me, what do you understand by evaluation? When you are asked to evaluate a particular position by the examiner, what do you do? What do you mean by evaluate? What exactly are you supposed to do? Evaluation ante enti?
Pros and cons.
Pros and cons is evaluation.
Not specifically, sir. We have to give every aspect or every perspective of the particular
Okay.
topic.
Em ledhu sir, evaluation ante, just make a note of that. Evaluation is to determine the significance, worth, or the validity how significant is it, or how worthy or how valid is that statement. So making a judgment on that, sir. Evaluation ante making a judgment on that, on its significance or its worth or its validity. Okay, after carefully examining the issue. Okay, next, elucidate ante, what do you do when you are asked to elucidate? Elucidate, this year there was this question, elucidate అని చెప్పి ఇచ్చాడు కదా, right, 2024 లో. Elucidate అంటే ఏం చేయాలండి? Elucidate అంటే you simply expand. రాసుకోండి. Elucidate means giving to give a clarifying explanation. Giving a clarifying explanation. So you are clarifying the statement. You are explaining the statement. Ante, you are not making any value judgments. Evaluation అంటే అదేండి, value judgment ఇవ్వడం అన్నమాట. Okay. So elucidate ante you are explaining, and as a part of that explanation you are clarifying the statement. This is what actually it means అనేది మనం క్లారిఫై చేస్తున్నాం అన్నమాట. ఓకే, నెక్స్ట్ ఎలాబొరేట్ అంటే, ఎలాబొరేట్ going deep and expanding that statement. Okay, expanding that statement. For example, a statement is given, we can expand the essence of the statement in various ways, isn't it? That's called as elaboration. ఓకే, ఎలాబరేట్ స్పీచ్ ఇచ్చారంటే ఎక్స్పాన్సివ్ స్పీచ్ ఇచ్చారని చెప్పి అర్థం అనమాట. ఓకే, చిన్న విషయాన్ని ఎలాబరేట్గా చెప్పాడు అంటే ఎక్స్పాండ్ చేసి చెప్పాడు అని అర్థం అనమాట. సో ఎలాబరేషన్ అంటే ఎక్స్పాండింగ్ దట్ స్టేట్మెంట్ అంటే లుకింగ్ ఎట్ ఇట్ ఫ్రమ్ వేరియస్ పర్స్పెక్టివ్స్ యూ కెన్ ఎలాబరేట్ ద స్టేట్మెంట్. నెక్స్ట్ అనలైజ్ అంటే ఏంటి? దిస్ ఇస్ అనదర్ వర్డ్ దట్ యూ కమ్ అక్రాస్ వెరీ ఆఫెన్, ఇజంట్ ఇట్? అనలైజ్. ఓకే, అనలైజ్ అంటే టు ఐడెంటిఫై అండ్ ఎగ్జామిన్ ద బేసిక్ ఎలిమెంట్స్. To identify and examine the basic elements or parts and discovering the relationship between the various parts of the question. Okay, now there is this question that was given. Analyze the significance of Panchayat Raj institutions, you know, for realizing the ideal of democratic decentralization. This is a question ichcharandi. Analyze the significance of Panchayat Raj institutions, okay, to realize the ideal of democratic decentralization. Okay, analyze. First, as is explained, there are two things here. One is Panchayat Raj institutions, and secondly, the ideal of democratic decentralization. So what you are supposed to do when you are asked to analyze is, firstly, what he is saying is identify and examine the basic elements or parts. ఈ రెండు పార్ట్స్ని బేసిక్గా ఈజ్ ఆస్కింగ్ us to examine. పంచాయత్ రాజ్ ఇన్స్టిట్యూషన్స్ అంటే ఏంటి, డెమోక్రటిక్ డీసెంట్రలైజేషన్ అంటే ఏంటి అని చెప్తూ వీటిని ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ చేస్తూ వీటి మధ్య ఇంటర్ రిలేషన్షిప్ని ఎస్టాబ్లిష్ చేయాలి. ఓకే, సో ఎస్టాబ్లిష్ ద ఇంటర్ రిలేషన్షిప్ బిట్వీన్ బోత్ దిస్ కాన్సెప్ట్స్ విచ్ ఆర్ గివెన్. ఓకే, అండ్ దెన్ యూ స్పీక్ అబౌట్ హౌ significant these are for this realizing this ideal. Got it? ఫస్ట్ ఈ రెండింటిని ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ చేస్తూ రెండింటి మధ్య ఇంటర్ రిలేషన్షిప్ని ఎస్టాబ్లిష్ చేస్తూ దెన్ యూ మేక్ దట్ అంటే బోత్ ఆఫ్ దెమ్ ఆర్ రిలేటెడ్ టు ఈచ్ అదర్ అనే ఆ రిలేషన్షిప్ని ఎస్టాబ్లిష్ చేస్తూ దెన్ యూ ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ హౌ సిగ్నిఫికెంట్ పంచాయత్ రాజ్ ఇన్స్టిట్యూషన్స్ క్యాన్ బి టు రియలైజ్ దిస్ ఐడియల్. ఓకే, నెక్స్ట్ క్రిటికల్లీ అనలైజ్ అంటే ఏంటి? క్రిటికల్లీ అనలైజ్, critically analyze. You know, it is not out of a coincidence that the examiner is giving all these words and there is a specific reason as to why he is giving all these words kada. మీరు చూసే ఉంటారు, ఒక్క పేపర్ చూడండి, you will find at least 4 or 5 different words which are used and each word has a way. That's నార్మల్గా అందరు కూడా కోచింగ్కి వెళ్తారు. ఎవ్రీబడి గోస్ టు కోచింగ్, ఎవ్రీబడి ప్రాబ్లీ హ్యాస్ ద సేమ్ కాంటెంట్ విత్ దెమ్, బట్ ద వే దే ఆర్ ప్రజెంట్ ద కాంటెంట్ ఈస్ ద కీ. దట్స్ వేర్ ద కీ లైస్. When if I am evaluating your answer script, okay, I will see whether you have properly addressed the question or not. You have properly understood what is called as the core demand of the question. Every question will have its own core demand. Every question will have its core demand. Whether you have, ఇప్పుడు మనం ఎగ్జాంపుల్స్ ఇస్తాము, ఓకే, చాలా స్ట్రైకింగ్ కంక్లూజన్ ఇస్తాము, రైట్, అండ్ we might use flow charts. We might use every other means which are available with us to make our answer look impressive. But the main test is whether the question had addressed the core demand of the question or the answer had addressed the core demand of the question or not. That's the key. Okay? Adi manam ardham chesukovalante we'll have to first understand these words. These are called as the directives of the question. The question is having a directive. You're asked to analyze, you're asked to elaborate, you're asked to elucidate. This is the directive which is there in the question. Okay, next, critically analyze. Any idea what it means? Critically analyze.
When we are asking about, when this word critically, it's asking us to give also the negative aspect of that, or all round perspective.
critical thinking is usually a thinking which is associated in trying to look at a specific issue from all sides. Then critical thinking antarandi. Okay, and critical thinking is usually employed for arriving at some conclusions or for arriving at some decisions, okay, or for choosing a path. Critical thinking antaru annamata. So ikkada kuda when you are asked to critically analyze, right, what you are supposed to do is, in the given issue you are supposed to look at it from a holistic perspective, identifying the positives as well as the negatives, and then ending up with a balanced conclusion. This is what's called as critical analysis. Raskondi, it means examining the idea from a comprehensive perspective, to identify both positive as well as negative, aspects and concluding by giving a balanced insight. అంటే your own idea అండి, a balanced idea, మీరు ఐడియాని ఇస్తారన్నమాట ఇక్కడ. So you are not taking a stand, you are just analyzing it, identifying its positives and negatives and giving a balanced insight, అంతే. Okay, this is what's called as critically analyze. Attempt a critique అంటాడు. Critique అంటే ఏంటి? Criticism, presenting the negative side of the statement is called as critique. Okay, next, discuss ante what do you mean by discuss? Discuss కూడా ఇస్తాడు కదా. What do you mean by discuss? Discuss simply means presenting the various viewpoints. ముగ్గురు కలిసి డిస్కస్ చేసుకుంటున్నారు అంటే ప్రతి ఒక్కరు వాడి వ్యూ పాయింట్ చెప్తున్నారు అనమాట. దానికి ఏం కంక్లూజన్ కూడా ఇవ్వాల్సిన అవసరం లేదండి. ఓకే, సో డిస్కషన్ is just presenting the various dimensions of a given issue. రాసుకోండి, discussion means presenting a detailed account covering all related dimensions or opinions. Next, comment ante something that you say which expresses your own personal opinion. Okay, next, comparative analysis ante comparative analysis. Similarities and differences. Comparative analysis, taking the different themes and identifying the similarities and differences. Okay, now see Pranit, whenever you are now looking at a question, look at the keyword. Remember this, looking at the keyword you should know what the core demand of the question is. So it's only through these keywords that you understand the core demand of the question. So make that a point whenever you are trying to look at the question. Okay, identify the keyword, then you should know, even మీరు ఎట్లా నేర్చుకుంటారు కదా, you should know what you should do with that information. whether you should present similarities and differences, or whether you should establish a interrelationship and try to examine the validity of the statement, whether he is asking for your personal opinion, whether you are just asked to present the various viewpoints. Discuss ante ade kada, just presenting the various viewpoints is called as discussion without making any judgment. That's called as discuss. So examiner is very clear on what he wants from the students. Okay, let us first also understand the nature of this exam. Chaala mandi students ki ee chinna difference teliyadu. They don't know this small distinction between these terms. That's actually where the key of the examination lies. Writing a good answer requires us to properly understand the question, properly understand the keywords of the question. Okay. Next, what do you mean by understanding the core demand of the question? Understanding the core demand ante enti asla? Okay, now please remember that this is probably the most important element. Okay, so organized structure, jargon, or interlinkage, or connectivity, or presentation, analysis, ivanni they come next. The first thing is understanding the core demand. This is the first thing. Okay, and you know, let us take a question here, right? Let's say, examine the challenges to republicanism in India. 2001 ichin question. Examine the challenges to republicanism in India. ఇది చాలా స్ట్రైట్ సింపుల్ క్వశ్చన్. కదా, చాలా ఈజీ క్వశ్చన్ కూడా, రైట్? నౌ what is it that the examiner wants us to write? What is the core demand of the question? Can you identify this? What would you write here? Threats or major challenges. Yeah. So what do you think are the threats to republicanism in India? Corruption. What do you mean by republicanism? The core demand of the question here is identifying the true meaning of the term republicanism. Identifying the true meaning of the word republicanism. That is the core demand of the question, isn't it? If that is not properly done, you cannot do justice to this question. Your answer cannot do justice to this question, isn't it? This is what is called as identifying the core demand of the question. Identifying those critical terms which require to be properly treated and clarified before you write an answer. You can write an answer very loosely. Okay, corruption is a problem. Okay, nepotism is a problem. Okay, but problem to what? What do you understand by republicanism? Idandi, core demand of the question is this. This is how we understand the core demand. Every question will have its core demand. There are some terms which require to be properly clarified for you to capture the essence of what is being asked. That is the key. So just మనం ఏం చేస్తామంటే క్వశ్చన్ కనిపించగానే, ఓకే, వీఆర్ రన్నింగ్ ఆఫ్టర్ ద టైం కదా, సో we just blindly with closed shut eyes we start writing answers. There was this friend of mine who got 72nd rank, got selected to IAS in Madhya Pradesh cadre. Okay, he writes very less, but whatever he writes is very relevant to the question asked. Okay, he has made it a habit to understand the core demand of the question. ఇవన్నీ మనకు తెలియకుండానే మనం చదువుకుంటూ ఉంటాం అంతే. You are simply studying and studying and studying and studying and accumulating information and reading that book and this book and that material and this material, updating current events, ఇవన్నీ చేస్తున్నాం మనం. ఓకే, బట్ ఇది కీ కదా, దిస్ ఇస్ ద కీ. హౌ టు రైట్ ఎ గుడ్ ఆన్సర్, హౌ టు ప్రాపర్లీ ఇంటర్ప్రిట్ ద క్వశ్చన్, రైట్? 2012, comment on judicial activism and social change. Comment on judicial activism and social change. మీకు జ్యుడిషియల్ యాక్టివిజం అంటే తెలుసు కదా ప్రణీత్, రైట్? నౌ టెల్ మీ, హౌ డు యూ అప్రోచ్ దిస్ క్వశ్చన్? వాట్ ఈస్ ద కోర్ డిమాండ్ ఆఫ్ ద క్వశ్చన్?
I think he is asking us to the link between social change and judicial activism.
Okay.
I think he is trying to asking us to establish the link between both.
Are they linked?
Definitely.
Are they linked?
Definitely.
Okay. So that's what you would write.
I will start with the dentist.
Okay. So tell me, how do you go about this question? Because this is something which you already know kada, andukane I'm asking you to try and deal with this question. See, normally class lo I speak, you listen, but here we'll try to have a conversation, right? It'll be more dialectic. Okay. So tell me, so how do you deal with this question? Judicial activism and social change. You know that judicial activism is the role that's being played by judiciary. We'll clarify the term here. Please remember, clarifying the terms is very important. Okay, very clear. You should make a clear distinction between judicial activism, judicial overreach. Ivanni chala terms unnai. Chala clear ga you should be able to bring out the nature of this process called judicial activism. Okay, now tell me, how do you deal with this? Just make మీరు ఎట్లా డీల్ చేస్తారు చెప్పండి.
So I will start with static terms.
This was given for how many? 10 marks in 2012. So
I will start with the static part of judicial review, its constitutional basis, and then its extension on judicial activism. And to give an example, like Diwali crackers have been changed to green crackers, which is a social change. So
Okay.
judicial activism has helped to social change, which we are now using, which is green crackers. Because he asked me to comment, I'll go one step forward and I'll also write about judicial overreach
and say
and say that it should not, judicial activism should not exceed and become judicial.
overreach. What do you mean by overreach, sir?
Like
Reaching out to the powers of other governmental organs.
executive powers of the other organizations.
Okay. So have you addressed the core demand of the question? Was supposed to comment on whether judicial activism as a catalyst of social change is good or bad. అంతేకాని judicial overreach అది పక్కన పెట్టండి. Judicial activism acting as a catalyst to social change, is that good or bad? ఇప్పుడు చెప్పండి ఆన్సర్.
Now it all changes.
Huh?
Now it all changes.
కదా, కంప్లీట్గా యువర్ ఆఫ్ ద
Yes.
ట్రాక్ కదండి. యు ఆర్ సపోజ్ టు కామెంట్ ఆన్ వెదర్ జ్యుడిషియల్ యాక్టివిజం యాక్టింగ్ యాజ్ ఎ క్యాటలిస్ట్ టు సోషల్ చేంజ్, ఇస్ ఇట్ కరెక్ట్ ఆర్ రాంగ్? ఇస్ ఇట్ కరెక్ట్ ఆర్ రాంగ్? మీకేమనిపిస్తుంది? డూ యూ థింక్ దట్ జ్యుడిషియరీ షుడ్ యాక్ట్ యాజ్ అన్ ఏజెంట్ ఆఫ్ సోషల్ చేంజ్ ఇన్ దిస్ కంట్రీ ఆర్ నాట్?
Yes.
యూ షుడ్.
Yes.
యూ థింక్ ఇట్ షుడ్?
Yes.
Okay, tell me why? Because other governmental organs are not properly doing their duty. అంతేనా? మరి దివాళీ అప్పుడు ఎన్విరాన్మెంట్ డిగ్రేడ్ అవుతుంది కాబట్టి ఒక అప్రోప్రియేట్ లా పార్లమెంట్ తీసుకురావచ్చు కదా, లేదా గవర్నమెంట్ కొన్ని రెగ్యులేషన్స్ పెట్టవచ్చు కదా. వాళ్ళ పని వాళ్ళు చేయట్లేదు కాబట్టి జ్యుడిషియరీ మీద తప్పట్లేదు. కాబట్టి జ్యుడిషియరీ ఈజ్ యాక్టింగ్ యాజ్ ఎ క్యాటలిస్ట్ టు social change. You support it. You think it's good. Now, looking at it from the other side, what I would say, who is supposed to act as the social change for a country like India, which is a democracy? Who should act as a social change, sir? ప్రజలకి ఏం కావాలో ప్రజల ప్రతినిధులు డిసైడ్ చేయాలి. People have given their mandate. People have given their power to the people's representatives sitting in the parliament to act as an agent of social change, not judiciary. Judiciary is a body of appointed judges. They don't represent anybody. So judiciary acting as an agent of social change maybe can only be a temporary measure, but it cannot be supported in the long run. That is how we should understand. See, agent of social change in a democracy is always the legislature, sir, not judiciary. There is a specific reason as to why he had given this, specifically linking it to social change. మనకి ఏం కావాలో, సొసైటీకి ఏం కావాలో ఎవరు డిసైడ్ చేయాలి? జ్యుడిషియరీయా? కాదు కదా. ఎవరు డిసైడ్ చేయాలి? పార్లమెంట్, పీపుల్స్ రిప్రజెంటేటివ్స్. దే షుడ్ డిసైడ్ on what the people want. So they should act as the agent of social change, not the executive, not the judiciary. It is the legislature. In a democracy, it is legislature. Kabatti, judiciary acting as an agent of social change is an undemocratic trend. Secondly, judiciary is not representative of any people. It is a body of appointed judges. Okay? Its duty is strictly to uphold the law. Okay? Agent of social change అనేది judiciary duty కాదు, parliament duty. చూసారా? The core demand of the question is this: establish the relationship between judicial activism and social change and comment on that. You are in general criticizing judicial activism and saying that it has got the potential of being judicial overreach. Kada? So that's where you understand the core demand of the question, sir. ఒక్క 1 minute క్వశ్చన్ని జాగ్రత్తగా అబ్జర్వ్ చేసామనుకోండి, యూ ఆర్ సపోజ్ టు కామెంట్ ఆన్ దిస్, యూ కామెంట్ ఆన్ సంథింగ్ ఎల్స్. దట్స్ వేర్ వీ జనరలీ ఆర్ ఆఫ్ ద ట్రాక్. సో దిస్ ఈస్ ద ట్రిక్ ఇన్ సివిల్ సర్వీసెస్, అండర్స్టాండింగ్ ద కోర్ డిమాండ్ ఆఫ్ ద క్వశ్చన్. ఎవ్రీ క్వశ్చన్ విల్ హ్యావ్ ఇట్స్ ఓన్ కోర్ డిమాండ్. అండర్స్టాండ్ దట్ ఫస్ట్. ఓకే? Right. So how do you understand the core demand of the question? First, identifying the different parts of the question. Question different parts. ఇది చిన్న క్వశ్చన్, సింపుల్ స్ట్రైట్ క్వశ్చన్, కానీ కొన్నిసార్లు కాంప్లెక్స్ క్వశ్చన్స్ ఉంటాయి కదా. ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్, సీ, వుడ్ యూ కాంకర్ విత్ ద వ్యూ దట్ ఇండియన్ ఫారెన్ పాలసీ హ్యాస్ బీన్ ఇన్ ఎ ట్రాన్సిషన్ మోడ్ ఫ్రమ్ నెహ్రూయిజం టు నియోలిబరలిజం? సపోర్ట్ యువర్ ఆన్సర్ విత్ ద హెల్ప్ ఆఫ్ సూటబుల్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్స్. ఓకే, ఇందులో మనకి ఇండియాస్ ఫారిన్ పాలసీ హ్యాస్ బీన్ ఇన్ ట్రాన్సిషన్ మోడ్ ఫ్రమ్ నెహ్రూయిజం టు నియోలిబరలిజం. నెహ్రూయిజం స్టార్టింగ్లో ఐడియలిజం ఉంది, ఆ తర్వాత మళ్ళీ రియలిజంకి వచ్చాం, ఆ తర్వాత ప్రాగ్మాటిజంకి వచ్చాం కదా. ఫేజ్ ఆఫ్ ప్రాగ్మాటిజం, ఫేజ్ ఆఫ్ రియలిజం, ఫేజ్ ఆఫ్ ఐడియలిజం, ఇవన్నీ కూడా డిఫరెంట్ ఫేజ్ ఆఫ్ ఇండియన్ ఫారెన్ పాలసీ. ఓకే, సో ఇవాళ నియోలిబరల్ వరల్డ్లో నియోలిబరల్ ఐడియాలజీ ఇంత వ్యాప్తి పొంది ఉన్నప్పుడు ఇండియన్ ఫారెన్ పాలసీ హస్ అస్యూమ్డ్ ఎ లాట్ ఆఫ్ ప్రాగ్మాటిక్ అప్రోచ్. ఓకే, లుక్ వెస్ట్ కానీ యాక్ట్ వెస్ట్ కానీ ఇవన్నీ కూడా దే ఆర్ అన్ అవుట్కమ్ ఆఫ్ మోర్ ప్రాగ్మాటిక్ అప్రోచ్ ఆఫ్ ఇండియన్ ఫారెన్ పాలసీ. ఓకే, సో విత్ సూటబుల్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్స్ ఇవ్వమని అంటున్నాడు అనమాట. నెహ్రూవిజంలో ఐడియలిజం ఉంది. హౌ డు యూ కన్సిడర్ ద నెహ్రూవియన్ ఫారెన్ పాలసీ యాజ్ ఐడియలిస్ట్? ఎట్లా కన్సిడర్ చేస్తాం? దానికి ఏమైనా సూటబుల్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్స్ ఉన్నాయా ఎగ్జాంపుల్స్? ఎక్స్క్యూజ్ మీ? ఓకే, అంటే అట్లా కాకుండా నెగ్లెక్టింగ్ ద సిగ్నిఫికెన్స్ ఆర్ ఇంపార్టెన్స్ ఆఫ్ మిలిటరీ ప్రిపేర్డ్నెస్ అండ్ స్ట్రెంథనింగ్ మిలిటరీ ఫర్ డిఫెన్స్. ఓకే, దట్ వాస్ వన్ idealist posture of international relations. By believing that goodwill diplomacy can attain peace with goodwill from all the neighbors. This is an idealist posture of foreign policy, and that's the reason why we are not able to assess the threat that we had faced, or even assess the strength or intentions of the Chinese, isn't it? That's the problem. With a very idealist posture, India had taken the United Nations, taken the Kashmir issue to United Nations organization. Chala idealism kada di. When we had the opportunity to take back our territory, which is now the present POK, instead of taking back our territory, which was very much well within our reach, because of our idealist posture, we had taken the issue to United Nations organization. Kada, అది ఐడియలిజం, నెహ్రూవియన్ ఐడియలిజం. అక్కడి నుంచి ట్రాన్సిషన్కి వచ్చాం మనము. ఐడియలిజం నుంచి రియలిజం, రియలిజం నుంచి ప్రాగ్మాటిజం. ఓకే, సో ఆ ప్రాసెస్ని మీరు ఐడెంటిఫై చేయాలండి with suitable examples. That is the core demand of the question. Okay, so understand the core demand and then you try to, so first నార్మల్గా అయితే మనం చేసేయగలం యాక్చువల్గా, పెద్ద ప్రాబ్లం ఏం కాదు. నార్మల్లీ ఇట్స్ నాట్ ఎ వెరీ బిగ్ ప్రాబ్లమ్ ఆర్ ఎ వెరీ బిగ్ ఛాలెంజ్ టు ఐడెంటిఫై ద కోర్ డిమాండ్ ఆఫ్ ఎ క్వశ్చన్. ఒక 2-3 సార్లు కూర్చొని చదివామనుకోండి అర్థమైపోతుంది వాట్ ఈజ్ ఈ ఆస్కింగ్ అస్, వాట్ ఈస్ ద ఇంటెంట్ ఆఫ్ ద ఎగ్జామినర్ మనకు తెలిసిపోతుంది. కానీ ఇక్కడ ఏమవుతుంది అంటే మెయిన్స్ ఎగ్జామినేషన్లో యూ హ్యావ్ ద కన్స్ట్రైంట్ ఆఫ్ టైమ్, నిజం ఇట్. మొత్తం ఎన్ని ఆన్సర్స్ రాయాలి నాకు చెప్పండి, ఇది మొత్తం ఎన్ని ఆన్సర్స్ రాయాలి? పొలిటికల్ సైన్స్ ఆప్షనల్ మీరు ఒక పేపర్ రాయాలి అంటే అవుని 19 క్వశ్చన్స్, ఒక 10 మార్క్స్. ఓకే, 20 మార్కర్స్ ఏమో ఐ థింక్ యు ఆర్ సపోజ్ టు రైట్ 3 కదా. 15 మార్కర్స్ ఐ థింక్ యు ఆర్ సపోజ్ టు రైట్ 6. ఓకే, ఇవి మనం మొత్తం అన్నీ 19. ఓకే, సో 10 మార్కర్ క్వశ్చన్స్ యు ఆర్ సపోజ్ టు రైట్ 10, 20 మార్కర్స్ 3, సో 15 మార్కర్స్ 6, సో మొత్తం 19 ఆన్సర్స్ ఇన్ హౌ మెనీ మినిట్స్? 180 minutes. ఓకే, అంటే మీకు రఫ్లీ ఒక్కొక్క క్వశ్చన్కి 10 నిమిషాలు ఉంది, అంతే కదా. సో యు ఆర్ యాక్చువల్లీ రేసింగ్ అగెయిన్స్ట్ టైమ్, ఇజన్ ఇట్. 10 నిమిషాలు ఉంది 10 మార్కర్స్కి, వీటికి ఇంకా ఎక్కువ టైం పడుతుంది. 20 మార్కర్స్ అంటే ఇంకా ఎక్కువ టైం పడుతుంది కదా. సో రైట్ ఫ్రమ్ ద టైమ్ యూ రిసీవ్ యువర్ పేపర్ యు ఆర్ రేసింగ్ అగెయిన్స్ట్ టైమ్, ఇజన్ ఇట్. సో ఆ ఎన్విరాన్మెంట్లో ఏమవుతుంది అంటే యూ టెన్ టు మిస్ఇంటర్ప్రెట్ ద క్వశ్చన్, యూ టెన్ టు బి మిస్డైరెక్టెడ్. ఆ టెన్షన్లో, ఆ ప్రెషర్లో యూ టెన్ టు బి missing out on identifying the core demand of the question. See, this session I wanted to take specifically because this is the lacuna that I had found in a lot of students who have content, enough content, okay, students who have been preparing for the last 4 or 5 years, but who are lacking very seriously in the way they are presenting their answers. Okay, that's the reason why I wanted to have a talk about this. Okay, so normally you can identify the core demand of the question, but here there is the problem of time. The problem of time valla, time constraint valla, you might not properly identify the core demand of the question. Okay, so first is that, and secondly identify the different parts of the question. ఇందాక చెప్పుకున్నాను చూసారా, ఇండియన్ ఫారిన్ పాలసీ, నెహ్రూవిజం, ఆ తర్వాత ప్రజెంట్ న్యూలిబరలిజం. ఓకే, సో నెహ్రూవిజంలో ఎలాంటి కండిషన్స్ ఉన్నాయి, న్యూలిబరల్ పాలసీస్ని అడాప్ట్ చేసుకున్న తర్వాత ఎట్లాంటి కండిషన్స్ ఉన్నాయి, సో ఏ విధంగా మన ఫారిన్ పాలసీ మారింది, వాటికి ఎగ్జాంపుల్స్ ఎట్లా ఇవ్వాలి, ఓకే అనేది మనం జాగ్రత్తగా ప్లాన్ చేసుకుని రాయాలి, ఇజన్ ఇట్. సో సూటబుల్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్స్ అంటే నెహ్రూవియన్ ఐడియలిజంకి ఎగ్జాంపుల్స్ మీరు చెప్పినట్టుగా నాట్ ఫోకసింగ్ ఆన్ స్ట్రెంథనింగ్ మిలిటరీ ప్రోవెస్ అండ్ మిలిటరీ ప్రిపేర్డ్నెస్, అడాప్టింగ్ NAM, ఓకే, అండ్ ఇవన్నీ రైట్, ఇంటర్నేషనలైజింగ్ ద కాశ్మీర్ ఇష్యూ, ఆల్ దీస్ వేర్ idealist postures, right. In recent times, because of the adoption of neoliberalism, we have become more pragmatic. Okay, we are trying to adopt the strategy of what's called as a balance or strategic balance in international relations. Okay, so previously, for example, we were very conscious and we were very sensitive to our relationship with the Arab countries. Why? Because we were in need of oil, obviously, and we have a sizable Muslim population in India, and therefore we did not want to hurt the sentiments, and therefore we wanted to develop very close and warm relationship with the Arab nations. Okay, therefore our policy towards the West Asia was lopsided. It was tilting more towards the Arab nations while ignoring Israel. Okay, it was only in recent times that we tried to balance the relationship with Israel along with the relationship with other countries. So this is what's called as strategic. India is trying to reposition itself, recalibrate itself as far as international relations is concerned. So this is being more pragmatic. Okay, right. Intakumundu we were very much tilted towards Soviet Union. We did not pursue proper relationship with the other bloc, but now we are trying to build close relationship. Multi-alignment antaru sir, non-alignment kakunda multi-alignment antaru kada. That's what we are now focusing upon, and trying to establish issue-based relationships and multi-alignments. India is focusing on multi-alignments. ఒక్కొక్క ఇష్యూకి సంబంధించి ఒక్కొక్క గ్రూపింగ్ తోటి రిలేషన్షిప్ ఎస్టాబ్లిష్ చేసుకుంటాం. ప్రపంచవ్యాప్తంగా అన్ని రకాల అంశాలని NAM దృక్పథంతో చూడం. ఓకే, సపోజ్ వీఆర్ హ్యావింగ్ ఎ స్పెసిఫిక్ ఇంట్రెస్ట్ విత్ అగ్రికల్చరల్ ఎక్స్పోర్టింగ్ కంట్రీస్, విల్ ఫార్మ్ ఎ గ్రూపింగ్ ఆఫ్ దాట్. ఇఫ్ వీఆర్ హ్యావింగ్ ఇంట్రెస్ట్ ఇన్ those countries which are vying for a permanent seat, we'll have a grouping with that. This is what's called as multi-alignment, isn't it?
Yes.
So we are trying to adopt a new pragmatic approach to realize our national interests. This is another aspect. So identifying the different parts of the question first, and secondly identifying the directive words. Na cheppukunnam kada ee critical elaborate ivanni kuda. Then interpreting the question properly, right? So we have to properly interpret the question, right? Then also when you are attempting to write an answer, whether the question that had been given to you, right, is able to be addressed by you with sufficient amount of content that you have or not అనేది కూడా చూసుకోవాలన్నమాట. This is what's called as the core demand of the question. So content, directive words, drift of the question, these are the things which gives you indication on the the core demand. Next, we find different directives which are given, not directive words. The question has its direction. For example, see, adoption of the new economic policy indicates a surrender of the constitutional commitment to socialism. This is its statement. Adoption of the new economic policy indicates a surrender of the constitutional commitment to socialism. Okay? Examine the relevance of socialism in India in the light of the above statement. This is the directive question. Okay? I'll write down the question here, right? What was the question? Adoption of new economic policy. Adoption of new economic policy indicates a surrender of constitutional commitment. Indicates a surrender of constitutional commitment to socialism. And ichi examine the relevance of socialism in India in the light of the above statement. Relevance of socialism in India in the light of above statement. In the light of the above statement. Now, how do you go about this? Now, socialism was included in the preamble to the Indian Constitution, to the 42nd Amendment Act of 1976, right? All this. So we were committed to the ideal of socialism. Of course, we had interpreted socialism in our own way, isn't it? Okay. Now, see, the question here is actually not a very complicated question. It's a very simple question. It only requires the right kind of an approach, but the question has a very clear directive. It is giving us a direction. Examine the relevance of socialism in India in the light of the above statement. Okay. Now, tell me, how do you deal with this?
So with respect to constitutional commitment to socialism, I'll emphasize on preamble and directive principles. Also with respect to the relevance, before going to that, with respect to the new economic policy, after the new economic policy, capitalism and liberalism has took its place, which led to where data shows that inequality has been developed according to Oxfam report. Inequalities have been developed, which is a byproduct of capitalism in one way, and also contrary to socialism, right to equal pay, livelihood, work, and all the other aspects have been compromised because of the economic policy, if I have to put it that way. With respect to relevance, I would emphasize on the other schemes where government is promoting socialism, like MNREG and all. This will be the short perspectives.
Okay. First, what is socialism as far as Indian Constitution is concerned? How did we define socialism in India? What is the meaning of socialism in India? We are committed to socialism, obviously, because socialism was included as a part of the preamble to the Indian Constitution, therefore it became a part of our objectives. India is a sovereign, socialist, secular democratic republic. Therefore, socialist is still a part of our constitutional commitment. It is a very important element of constitutional morality in India, isn't it? So we are committed to socialism, there is no doubt about that. Okay. So first you speak about the 42nd Amendment Act, you speak about how India had remained committed to socialism in India. How? Were there any steps taken in this country which aimed to establish socialism as we defined it for ourselves? Were there any steps initiated in this country?
The term was added.
Yeah, the term was added to 42nd Amendment Act, but you know that socialism in India is described as socialistic pattern of society. Have you heard that term before? Socialism in India is described as socialistic pattern of society. It is not doctrinaire socialism. It is not socialism as is conceived in the Western countries. In Western countries, socialism ante enti? Nationalization of private property. Okay, we discussed that when we discussed Karl Marx yesterday, I guess, isn't it? Socialism indicates nationalization of property, nationalization of means of production, state assuming big role in organizing economic activities and taking economic decisions through public sector. This is what we had identified as socialism, isn't it? But in India, we have not adopted doctrinaire socialism. What we have adopted is what's called as socialistic pattern of society. That means a society inspired by the ideals of socialism. సో ఏమేమైతే ఐడియల్స్ సోషలిజం ఉంటాయో ఆ ఐడియల్స్ మనకి గైడింగ్ ఫోర్స్గా ఉంటాయి, అంతే. అంతేగాని అబాలిషన్ ఆఫ్ ప్రైవేట్ ప్రాపర్టీ, అబాలిషన్ ఆఫ్ క్లాసెస్, నేషనలైజేషన్ అవేమి ఉండవు ఇండియాలో. సోషలిజంకి సంబంధించిన ఐడియల్స్ ఏమైతే ఉంటాయో ఆ ఐడియల్స్ని మనం గైడ్గా తీసుకుంటాం అన్నమాట. దట్ ఈస్ వాట్ ఈస్ కాల్డ్ యాజ్ సోషలిస్టిక్ ప్యాటర్న్ ఆఫ్ సొసైటీ. సో వీ హ్యావ్ గివెన్ అవర్ ఓన్ డెఫినేషన్ ఆఫ్ సోషలిజం. We have given our own definition of socialism, right? Now that is our commitment. That is our commitment. We are trying to establish an egalitarian society guided by the ideals of socialism. We are trying to ensure a society in which there is no concentration of wealth. దానికోసమే we are trying to ensure that production is done to meet social needs. Okay? We are trying to give a better deal, a fair deal to the lower sections to ensure equal opportunities. ఇవి సోషలిజం ఇండియాలో. Okay? And the same was said by Supreme Court in a very famous case called the Nakara versus Union of India case. Have you heard this? Nakara versus, మీరు ఆ కేసు గురించి రాయకుండా మీరు ఎగ్జామినేషన్లో ఆన్సర్ రాయలేరు సోషలిజం మీద. Nakara versus Union of India case, I think it was in 1982, I guess, in which Supreme Court declared that socialism in India is democratic socialism. అంతేకాదు నాట్ డాక్ట్రినైర్ సోషలిజం. ఇట్స్ ఎ బ్లెండ్ ఆఫ్ మార్క్సిజం అండ్ గాంధీజం అని చెప్పి అన్నాడు అనమాట. సో మనకి డాక్ట్రినైర్ సోషలిజం లేదు, ఇట్స్ ఎ బ్లెండ్ ఆఫ్ గాంధీజం అండ్ సోషలిజం. ఓకే, సో వీ హ్యావ్ అవర్ ఓన్ డెఫినేషన్. Yet another case called the good governance, Foundation for Good Governance case. Foundation for Good Governance case of 2007. Supreme Court declared that socialism in India is welfareism. Okay? Socialism in India is welfareism. Okay? Welfareism. To ensure equal opportunity to everybody. So socialism in India, Supreme Court made it very, very explicit. Socialism in India does not indicate abolition of classes. Socialism in India does not indicate abolition of right to property or nationalization of all means of production. Socialism in India is welfareism, to ensure equal opportunity. Okay? So if the government is promoting welfare activities, If government is establishing welfare mechanism, government is engaging in positive discrimination to ensure that the people have equal opportunities, okay, we are still committed to our idea of socialism. Got it? Right. Next, ఇది మన socialism అంటే. Next, adoption of new economic policy. Does it indicate surrender of socialism? Adoption of new economic policy had in fact led to government stepping up its welfare activities. ఎప్పుడండి మహాత్మా గాంధీ నేషనల్ రూరల్ ఎంప్లాయ్మెంట్ గ్యారంటీ ప్రోగ్రామ్? 5. పోస్ట్ లిబరలైజేషన్ పీరియడే కదా, పోస్ట్ న్యూ ఎకనామిక్ పాలసీ. ద లార్జెస్ట్ social security initiative ever launched in a country across the entire world was launched after 1991. Government of India adopted the strategy of inclusive growth to ensure that the fruits of development are realized by all sections, all segments and all sectors of the economy, isn't it? Government of India introduced a series of legislations in recent times to lend a helping hand to the vulnerable sections of population. Like for example, we had this Forest Rights Act. Have you heard that? 2006. Then we had Unorganized Sector Workers Social Security Act. You know, old age pension scheme, old age Indira Gandhi National Old Age Pension Scheme, Indira Gandhi National Disabilities Pension Scheme. ఇట్లాంటి రకరకాల పెన్షన్ స్కీమ్స్ గవర్నమెంట్స్ స్ట్రెంథన్ చేస్తున్నాయి. అట్లాగే స్టేట్ గవర్నమెంట్స్ కూడా యాజ్ ఎ పార్ట్ ఆఫ్ దేర్ ఎఫర్ట్, స్టేట్ గవర్నమెంట్స్ ఆర్ ఆల్సో స్ట్రెంథనింగ్ ఎ లాట్ ఆఫ్ వెల్ఫేర్ mechanisms. Okay, all this indicate that adoption of new economic policy had not in any way resulted in surrender of our socialism. You know it? So here first మనం ఇండియాలో సోషలిజంని ఎట్లా డిఫైన్ చేసుకున్నామో రాయాలి. మనం సోషలిజంని ఎట్లా చూసాము, ఎట్లా అర్థం చేసుకున్నాము. కాన్స్టిట్యూషనల్లీ వాట్ సోషలిజం ఇండికేట్స్ టు అస్, దట్ ఈస్ వేర్ ద కీస్. సోషలిజం అనగానే మనం వెంటనే వెస్టర్న్ ఐడియా ఆఫ్ సోషలిజంకి వెళ్ళిపోకూడదండి. ఓకే, రైట్. అండ్ దెన్ వీ స్పీక్ అబౌట్ వెదర్ ద న్యూ ఎకనామిక్ పాలసీ దట్ వీ హ్యావ్ అడాప్టెడ్ ఈజ్ లీడింగ్ టు సరెండర్ ఆఫ్ సోషలిజం ఆర్ నాట్. చూసారా ఇక్కడ ద డైరెక్టివ్ ఆఫ్ ద క్వశ్చన్, ద డ్రిఫ్ట్ ఆఫ్ ద క్వశ్చన్, ద క్వశ్చన్ ఈజ్ హ్యావింగ్ ఎ డ్రిఫ్ట్. సో ఇక్కడ మనం ఎప్పుడైనా కూడా మనం ఒక క్వశ్చన్ని చూసినప్పుడు ఇఫ్ యూ స్పెండ్ విత్ దిస్ సమ్ టైమ్, ఓకే, you'll get the clue. You know, there used to be one sir called Rao, Dr. Rao ani. He was the one who for the first time established Rao's IAS at Delhi. He was a legend who was responsible for the selection of thousands of officers, you know, in civil services. You know what he said? The question should first be questioned by you. Question the question. ఎందుకు ఇచ్చాడు ఈ క్వశ్చన్, దీని వెనకాల అర్థం ఏంటి, అంతరార్థం ఏంటి? ఓకే, చాలా ఈజీగా మనం రాంగ్ ఫుటింగ్ వెళ్ళిపోవచ్చు కదా. మీరు అన్నారు ఇప్పుడు న్యూ ఎకనామిక్ పాలసీతో క్యాపిటలిజం ఎంట్రెన్స్ అయిపోయింది ఇండియాలో, ఓకే, కాబట్టి సోషలిజం పట్ల మనకున్న చిత్తశుద్ధి బలహీనపడిందని చెప్పి అనేస్తున్నాం కదా. కానీ మనం సోషలిజంని డిఫరెంట్ వేలోనే మనం వీ హ్యావ్ ఇంటర్ప్రిటెడ్ సోషలిజం ఇన్ ఎ డిఫరెంట్ వే. సోషలిజం అండర్ ద ఇండియన్ కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్ సింప్లీ మీన్స్ వెల్ఫేరిజం. ఎందుకు? బికాస్ ద ఇండియన్ కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్ని ఇంటర్ప్రెట్ చేసే అధికారం ఎవరికి ఉంది? సుప్రీంకోర్టుకు ఉంది. ద సుప్రీంకోర్ట్ ఇంటర్ప్రెటెడ్, సుప్రీంకోర్ట్ ఈస్ ద ఫైనల్ ఇంటర్ప్రెటర్ ఆఫ్ ఇండియన్ కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్ అండ్ సుప్రీంకోర్ట్ ఇంటర్ప్రెటెడ్ సోషలిజం టు మీన్ వెల్ఫేరిజం. అంతే, అక్కడే ఉంది కీ. అండ్ టిల్ ద టైమ్ గవర్నమెంట్ ఈస్ committed to welfare activities, government is committed to the ideal of socialism. Okay, so here the directive of the question is, you know, very important. You know, there is some questions have these directives. Mana 2024 lo adigina question, elucidate. Inda man cheppukoran sir, elucidate. What do you mean by elucidate, sir? Elucidate the meanings. Elucidate the meanings inherent in the term political. Okay, yeah, elucidate. The meanings inherent in the term. చూసారా ఇప్పుడు ఎంత ఈజీ అయ్యిందో మనకి ఎల్యూసిడేట్ అన్న పదానికి అర్థం తెలిసినప్పుడు నవ్ యు నో హౌ టు గో అబౌట్ ఇట్ కదా, రైట్? Elucidate the meanings inherent in the term political with appropriate illustrations. Okay. So what do you mean by political? Affairs of the state are called as political. Have you heard about feminists who said the personal is political? Have you heard that statement? The personal is political statement vinnara? Feminism lo vinnaru kada? That's a key phrase in feminism. Personal is political.
Personal lives come under political issues. Personal issues come under political issues, something.
Yeah, of course, right. That's what they are saying, feminists are saying. So what are the various meanings that are associated with the term political? The various meanings that are associated with the term political. Okay, that's the question that is given. This is one meaning which you can discern. He's asked us with appropriate illustrations, isn't it? With appropriate illustrations you're supposed to write. So itlanti question ki answer rayali ante meeku ade cheppadu chusaru nenu, you should have the big picture. Liberals political ni etla define చేస్తున్నారు, మార్క్సిస్ట్స్ పొలిటికల్ ని ఎట్లా డిఫైన్ చేస్తున్నారు, ఫెమినిస్ట్స్ పొలిటికల్ ని ఎట్లా డిఫైన్ చేస్తున్నారు. ఓకే, లిబరల్స్ అంటే లిబరలిజం, హౌ డస్ ఇట్ అండర్స్టాండ్ పొలిటికల్ యాక్టివిటీస్ or political actions? Any idea? Liberals.
The state should be minimal and the state should not enter into the lives of.
What are those actions which are considered to be political actions by liberals? The liberal ideology proposes that, see, in every society there are groups, and these groups have their own interests. Kada? Right? There is a likelihood that there could be a clash of interests. Kada? వ్యవస్థలో రకరకాల వర్గాలు ఉంటాయి, ఆ వర్గాల మధ్య ఘర్షణలు ఉంటాయి, వాళ్ళ ఇంట్రెస్ట్స్ క్లాష్ అయ్యి ఘర్షణలు ఉంటాయి. పీపుల్ ఆఫ్ తెలంగాణ వాంటెడ్ సెపరేట్ స్టేట్, పీపుల్ ఆఫ్ ఆంధ్ర వాంటెడ్ సమైక్యాంధ్ర. దెర్ ఇస్ ఎ క్లాష్ ఆఫ్ ఇంట్రెస్ట్స్. ఓకే, సో the process of resolution of conflicting interests through authoritative decisions is called as politics. So all those activities which are aimed at resolution of conflicting interests, isn't it? Okay, so all those activities that are aimed at resolution of conflicting interests are called political activities. This is how the liberals have interpreted the word political. Marxists consider politics as a part of superstructure and not base. Therefore, political activities are those which are intended for strengthening an exploitative mode of production. Okay, that is political activities. So itla the term political has different meanings. Okay, so you are supposed to give these examples, illustrations. Liberals ki itla, Marxists ki itla. Okay, there is another view called the power view of politics. You know, have you heard that? The power view of politics proposes that activities which are aimed at acquisition, possession, display and exercise of power are called as political activities. Okay, so these are Machiavelli, Thomas Hobbes, Morgenthau. These are realists. Morgenthau. All these people have proposed the power view of politics. Laswell, all of them have proposed the power view of politics. This is what's called as the power view of politics. Got it? These are different meanings within politics. So not only do we have some key words, okay, the questions will also have their own directives. Okay, In the light of above statement, give proper illustrations. Okay?
So one doubt.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask last or not?
Excuse me?
Last or not?
ఏది
Doubt.
అడగండి పర్లేదు.
Sir, when you ask me the question, illustrate the meaning inherent in the term political with appropriate illustrations. I know about this feminist perspective of personalist political. I know it, sir, but I didn't use it.
అదే
I did not get that thing that I have to use it here.
Yeah.
Also, I have got other perspective like polis and state, ancient Greek. So how they have different political.
Yeah.
And అటువైపు వెళ్ళిపోయాను, sir.
Okay.
Even though if I write answer on that.
Yeah, you can include that. That's also the term మీరు ఇంట్రడక్షన్లో రాయొచ్చండి. The term political is derived from the ancient Greek city state called polis.
So my doubt is, after hearing your answer, I thought this is better, but I got this answer. How do I, what do we call, shift from this to this?
That comes only by practice, sir. చెప్పేది మీకు అందుకనే క్వశ్చన్ని మనం ప్రాపర్గా చదవాలి ఫస్ట్. ఈజ్ నాట్ ఆస్కింగ్ అస్, ఈజ్ ఆస్కింగ్ అస్ ద ఇన్హరెంట్ మీనింగ్స్, ద మీనింగ్స్ ఇన్ ద టర్మ్ పొలిటికల్ కదా. మీరు చెప్పింది తప్పేం కాదండి. పాలిస్ నుంచే పొలిటికల్ అన్న వర్డ్ డిరైవ్ అయ్యింది అని చెప్పి రాయొచ్చు మీరు అక్కడ. ఓకే, రాస్తూ అక్కడ ఏం చెప్పొచ్చు అంటే ఆల్ దోస్ యాక్టివిటీస్ విచ్ ఆర్ అసోసియేటెడ్ విత్ ద అఫేర్స్ ఆఫ్ ద స్టేట్ ఆర్ కాల్డ్ యాజ్ పొలిటికల్ యాక్టివిటీస్ ఫర్ ద ఏన్షియంట్ గ్రీక్స్. అదొక మీనింగ్. ఓకే, ఇన్ మోడర్న్ టైమ్స్ we have liberals giving their own meaning, Marxists giving their own meanings. He's asking us to give us illustrations ante he's asking us to mention all the different streams of thought which give different meanings of politics. Ante. Okay, అర్థమైంది కదా మీకు. The question has its directive, sir. మనం ఇది ఎప్పుడు వస్తుంది అంటే కాంటెంట్ ఫస్ట్ రావాలి, ఇన్ఫర్మేషన్ నాలెడ్జ్ ఫస్ట్ రావాలి, వచ్చిన తర్వాత క్వశ్చన్ని ప్రాపర్గా అర్థం చేసుకోవడం నేర్చుకోవాలి. We'll get that with time. Not a problem at all. Okay, you keep practicing answers, you get that with time. Just look at this question that was given in 2009. Just see, I'll just read out the question. It was half a page question. You know, comment on political theory is quite simply man's attempt to consciously understand and solve the problems of his group life and organization. It is disciplined investigation of political problems, not only to show what a political practice is, but also to show what it means. In showing what a practice means or what it ought to mean, political theory can alter what is. This statement was given by a person called Sabine, and this statement was given in 2009, and you are asked to comment on this for 20 marks. అంటే 4, మీకు తెలుసు కదా 20 మార్క్స్ క్వశ్చన్స్కి ఎన్ని షీట్స్ రాయాలి, 4 sides రాయాలి కదా. ఇది ఇంత పెద్ద క్వశ్చన్ ఇచ్చాడు మనకి, రైట్. ఒక పెద్ద స్టేట్మెంట్ ఇచ్చాడు, చివరిలో సింపుల్ చిన్న కామెంట్ అని చెప్పి ఇచ్చేసాడు. బట్ దెర్ ఆర్ లాట్ ఆఫ్ డైరెక్షన్స్ ఇన్ దిస్ స్టేట్మెంట్. పొలిటికల్ జస్ట్ ఇంత పెద్ద క్వశ్చన్ ఉన్నా కూడా once you start breaking down the question, ఆ డైరెక్టివ్స్ని మనం బ్రేక్ డౌన్ చేస్తుంటే ఇట్ బికమ్స్ వెరీ ఈజీ యాక్చువల్లీ టు ఆన్సర్. మనం ఇప్పుడు దాకా చెప్పుకున్నాం చూసారా, లిబరల్ వ్యూ ఆఫ్ స్టేట్. వాట్ ఈస్ ద లిబరల్ వ్యూ ఆఫ్ స్టేట్? వాట్ యు మీన్ బై ద లిబరల్ వ్యూ ఆఫ్ స్టేట్? వి జస్ట్ లిబరల్ వ్యూ ఆఫ్ పాలిటిక్స్.
Each group will have its own interests, and those interests will lead to classes. Finally, will lead to.
Okay, the entire process of the conflicts and their resolution through authoritative decisions is called as politics. సో ఈ సొసైటీలో గ్రూప్స్ ఉంటాయి, ఇండివిజువల్స్ ఉంటారు, వాళ్ళకి కొట్లాట్లు ఉంటాయి, సంఘర్షణ ఉంటుంది. ఆ సంఘర్షణని తీర్చడానికి రాజ్యం చేపట్టే అన్ని రకాల కార్యక్రమాలని అంతా కలిపి ద ఎంటైర్ ప్రాసెస్ ఈజ్ కాల్డ్ యాజ్ పాలిటిక్స్. ఇఫ్ దెర్ ఇస్ ఎ గ్రూప్ విచ్ ఈస్ హ్యావింగ్ ఎ డిమాండ్, ఇట్ ఈస్ ఎంగేజింగ్ ఇన్ పొలిటికల్ యాక్టివిటీ. If there is another group which is countering it, this is also political activity. The both groups clashing with each other, political activity. The state intervening to resolve the conflict through authoritative decisions. The entire process is called as political process. Got it, sir? Okay. Now, ఇది లిబరల్ వ్యూ. మనం ఈ లిబరల్ వ్యూ ఆఫ్ పాలిటిక్స్ చదువుతాం. ఇస్ అ పార్ట్ ఆఫ్ పొలిటికల్ సైన్స్ అండ్ ఇంటర్నేషనల్ రిలేషన్స్. దీన్ని కరెక్ట్గా అర్థం చేసుకున్నాం అనుకోండి, దట్ బిగ్ సెంటెన్స్ చూసారా, ఆ పెద్ద పారాగ్రాఫ్ చూసారా, ఇట్స్ కేక్ వాక్ రియలీ. ఓకే, మనకి సింపుల్ పొలిటికల్ థియరీ ఈజ్ అన్ అటెంప్ట్ టు అండర్స్టాండ్ అండ్ సాల్వ్ ద ప్రాబ్లమ్స్ ఆఫ్ గ్రూప్స్. ఇదే మనం చెప్పుకుంది. దట్ ఈస్ వాట్ ది స్టేట్మెంట్ ఈస్ సెయింగ్, అంతే, రైట్? అండ్ ఆర్గనైజేషన్స్. It is a disciplined investigation of political problems, not only to show, but not only to show what is political practice, but also to show what it means. In showing what a practice means or what it ought to mean, political theory can alter what is. See, there are two groups. One group has a demand. Okay, let's say there is a group of people who are backward and they want to be included in the list of backward castes. They put forth their demand. Okay, and this might be countered by another group. There is a clash or a conflict. Okay, the state will intervene, the state will study, the state will understand the reality, the state will understand the plight and the justice behind the demand, and then the state will take its decisions. So it is changing what is to what ought to be. కళ్ళ ముందు ఉన్నదాన్ని అన్యాయం ఉంది కాబట్టి అది ఎలా ఉండాలో, వాట్ ఆట్ టు బీగా ఉండాలో దాన్ని మార్చే ప్రయత్నం కూడా చేస్తుంది అనమాట. దిస్ ఈజ్ పొలిటికల్ థియరీ అని చెప్పి అంటాడు. ఇట్స్ యాక్చువల్లీ ఎ లిబరల్ వ్యూ ఆఫ్ పాలిటిక్స్. ఓకే, సో మనకి క్వశ్చన్ చాలా కాంప్లికేటెడ్గా, చాలా డైరెక్టివ్స్ తోటి, చాలా ఎలాబరేట్గా కనిపిస్తుంది. ఓకే, ఐ రిమెంబర్ వన్స్ వెన్ ఐ హ్యాడ్ టేకెన్ ద సివిల్ సర్వీస్ ఎగ్జామినేషన్, ఒకసారి ఏం చేశారంటే మొత్తం ప్రియాంబుల్ ఇచ్చాడు, ఒక పేజ్ అంతా ఇచ్చి అడాప్టెడ్ ఆన్ అని చెప్పి ఒక డేట్ ఉంటుంది చూసారా, అక్కడ ఒక ఎక్స్ మార్క్ పెట్టాడు. పెట్టి ద ఎక్స్ మార్క్ రిఫర్స్ టు అని చెప్పి డేట్ ఆఫ్ అడాప్షన్, డేట్ ఆఫ్ కమెన్స్మెంట్, డేట్ ఆఫ్ ద సైనింగ్ ఆఫ్ ఏదో 4 ఇచ్చాడు అనమాట. సింపుల్ క్వశ్చన్, కానీ దానికి మొత్తం ప్రియాంబుల్ అంతా ఇచ్చాడు పేపర్లో. వేస్టింగ్ అవర్ టైం, ఆబ్వియస్లీ. ఓకే, దీనికి కూడా పెద్ద పెద్దగా కనిపిస్తాయి క్వశ్చన్స్, కానీ ద సొల్యూషన్స్ ఆర్ వెరీ సింపుల్. ఓకే, రైట్. సో దిస్ ఈస్ హౌ యూ అప్రోచ్ ద క్వశ్చన్, అండర్స్టాండ్ ద డిమాండ్ ఆఫ్ ద క్వశ్చన్, రైట్? అండ్ next important thing to secure good marks as far as political science is concerned is, obviously everybody knows that political science lo unna advantage entante you can be more creative and imaginative in writing your answers, but of course I told you that freedom comes with a lot of responsibility. That you should keep in mind always. Okay, freedom ఇచ్చారు కదా అని చెప్పి ఏది పెడితే రాయకూడదు, ఎక్కడెక్కడి నుంచి తెచ్చి దీనిలో పెట్టడానికి ట్రై చేయకూడదు. ఓకే, యూ షుడ్ నో వెరీ క్లియర్లీ how do you integrate your knowledge of current events with the political science. How do you draw the lines? ఏది పెట్టాలి, ఏది పెట్టకూడదు, కొన్నిసార్లు మనం టెంప్ట్ అవుతామండి. మనకి కరెంట్ ఈవెంట్స్ కనిపించిన చాలా టాపిక్స్ని మనం పెట్టేయాలి ఆన్సర్లో. ఇక్కడ ఎక్కడి నుంచో మొత్తానికి ఏదో ఒక లింక్ పట్టుకొచ్చేసి దాన్ని పెట్టేయచ్చు అనుకుంటాం. ఓకే, సో దాట్స్ వేర్ యాక్చువల్లీ రైట్ ఫ్రీడమ్ should be exercised with a lot of responsibility. Okay, so here you should know how to integrate current events. Now what I keep suggesting to all my students is, it is better that at least those topics which have high current events inputs, atlanti topics ki better prepare your own notes. అర్థమైందా మీకు? కరెంట్ ఈవెంట్స్ ఎక్కువ ఇన్పుట్స్ ఉండే టాపిక్స్ కొన్ని ఉంటాయి కదా మనకి. ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ వీ మైట్ హ్యావ్ ఎ టాపిక్ ఆన్ కోఆపరేటివ్ ఫెడరలిజం ఇన్ ఇండియా. ఓకే, సో కోఆపరేటివ్ ఫెడరేషన్ అంటే ఏంటి అనేది మనం చదువుకుంటాం. ఓకే, అండ్ కెన్ టెల్ మీ వాట్ స్టెప్స్ వర్ టేకెన్ ఇన్ రీసెంట్ టైమ్స్ ఫర్ ప్రమోటింగ్ కోఆపరేటివ్ ఫెడరేషన్ ఇన్ రీసెంట్ టైమ్స్?
I should say GST councils, and also
నీతి ఆయోగ్. ఫస్ట్ నీతి ఆయోగ్ సార్, జిఎస్టీ కౌన్సిల్ కంటే కూడా ఫస్ట్ నీతి ఆయోగ్. నీతి ఆయోగ్ వాజ్ కన్సిడర్డ్ టు బి, అసలు దాని వన్ ఆఫ్ ద రీజన్స్ ఫర్ ఫార్మేషన్ ఆఫ్ నీతి ఆయోగ్ ఇస్ టు ప్రమోట్ ద స్పిరిట్ ఆఫ్ కోఆపరేటివ్ ఫెడరేషన్ అన్నారు కదా. దాని ఫార్మేషన్లో ఉన్న ఒక ప్రధాన ఆబ్జెక్టివే ఇది, నీతి ఆయోగ్. ఓకే, సో ఇట్లాంటి టాపిక్ ఉంది. కోఆపరేటివ్ ఫెడరేషన్ మీద మీరు నోట్స్ రాస్తున్నారనుకోండి, ఇట్లాంటి టాపిక్లో చాలా కరెంట్ ఇన్పుట్స్ ఉన్నాయి మనకి. అట్లాంటి టాపిక్స్కి ఐ సజెస్ట్ దట్ యూ ప్రిపేర్ యువర్ ఓన్ నోట్స్ and incorporate all the things that you want to incorporate in that topic. right away in the notes. Okay. So high current content ఉన్నటువంటి టాపిక్స్లో it is better that candidates prepare their own notes. Okay. So the ability to properly integrate current events, the most important thing that you have to keep in mind when you are integrating current events is the relevance of the event to the topic of discussion. అది ఎంత రిలవెంట్ అనేది మీరు జడ్జ్ చేసుకోవాలి. ఓకే. ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ సమ్ థింగ్స్ మైట్ గో అవుట్ ఆఫ్ రిలవెన్స్, రైట్? సమ్ థింగ్స్ మైట్ గో అవుట్ ఆఫ్ రిలవెన్స్ అండ్ దే మైట్ నాట్ బి వెరీ ఇంపార్టెంట్, right? For example, let's say if the Indian foreign minister had attended NAM summit, let's say, okay, just because the Indian foreign minister had attended the NAM summit, you don't conclude saying that NAM continues to be an important element of Indian foreign policy. You don't say that, okay? And you don't try to establish that NAM is very important for Indian foreign policy because that for Indian foreign minister attended the NAM summit. NAM is not that important now. India is now cold shouldering the idea of NAM, isn't it? NAM is not very important for India today, కదా? కాబట్టి ఆ కరెంట్ ఈవెంట్ ఉంది, కానీ నిజంగానే ఆ కరెంట్ ఈవెంట్ అనేది మన పాయింట్ ఆఫ్ వ్యూని కరెక్ట్గా ఎస్టాబ్లిష్ చేయట్లా, దాన్ని మరి ఇన్కార్పొరేట్ చేయకూడదు. ఓకే. సో యూ షుడ్ నో హౌ టు ఇంటిగ్రేట్, యూ షుడ్ నో వెదర్ ద కరెంట్ ఈవెంట్ హ్యాస్ రిలవెన్స్ టు ద సబ్జెక్ట్ మ్యాటర్ దట్ యూఆర్ గోయింగ్ టు రైట్ అబౌట్ ఇన్ ద ఆన్సర్ ఆర్ నాట్. అది అక్కడ ఒక్కటి కేర్ తీసుకోవాలండి. అందుకనే దేర్ ఆర్ సమ్ థింగ్స్ విచ్ మీరు కరెంట్ ఈవెంట్స్ చదివినప్పుడే మీకు తెలిసిపోతుంది. ఓకే, రైట్? ఇఫ్ యూ నో ప్రాపర్లీ ఇండియన్ ఫారెన్ పాలసీ, యూ విల్ నో దట్ ఇండియా ఈజ్ నాట్ వెరీ సీరియస్ అబౌట్ పర్సూయింగ్ ఇట్స్ నేషనల్ ఇంట్రెస్ట్ ఆబ్జెక్టివ్స్ త్రూ NAM. NAM ద్వారా ఇండియన్ ఆబ్జెక్టివ్స్ని రియలైజ్ కావాలని మనం అనుకోవట్లేదు. వీ హ్యావ్ ఏమంటారు దాన్ని, మూడ్ ఆన్, ఇజంట్ ఇట్? ఇండియా హ్యాస్ మూడ్ ఆన్. ఇండియా ఇస్ నౌ trying to explore new vistas and new opportunities to realize our national objectives and priorities, not NAM. NAM was important at one point of time, but not today. కానీ మనం దాన్ని తెచ్చి దీనిలో పెట్టి NAM ఇప్పటికి కూడా ఇంపార్టెంట్ అని చెప్పి మనం అట్లాగా, అది నేను చెప్తుంది. సో యూ షుడ్ హ్యావ్ ప్రాపర్ అండర్స్టాండింగ్, రైట్? So first, relevance, keep in mind relevance, and two, preparing own notes for those things which are having very high current content. Okay, next, see, for particularly the 15 and the 20 markers, okay, it is always good for students to adopt what's called as contextual approach. You present the context, particularly 15 marks and 20 marks. Okay, for example, if you are, tell me, if you are writing about the Hobbes's ideas on state of nature, what would be the context that you will have to bring in? His time, characterized by disunity, anarchy during the English Civil War, which made him value order. A context ni manam answer loki తీసుకురావాలన్నమాట. Okay, so adopting a contextual approach also gives a lot of credibility to the answer. ఓకే, నెక్స్ట్, కొన్ని స్టాటిక్ థియరీస్ ఉన్నాయి కదా. ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్, వీ హ్యావ్ ప్లాటోస్ ఐడియాస్ ఆన్, లెట్స్ సే, ఫిలాసఫర్ కింగ్. ఓకే, అది అనుకోండి. ఏ వెరీ ఈజీ వే ఫర్ క్యాండిడేట్స్ టు గెట్ వెరీ గుడ్ మార్క్స్ ఇన్ పొలిటికల్ సైన్స్ is by identifying contemporary relevance to the static theories. Okay, contemporary relevance. Let's say the importance of the ruler to be virtuous. Okay, importance of the ruler to be virtuous is underscored by the fact that there are a lot of people who have become leaders and who have amassed a lot of wealth. and they have exploited the society by exercising power, political power, you know. So itlanti context lo Plato's theory of philosopher king becomes very relevant even in the contemporary times. So కొన్ని realities ni explain చేసేటప్పుడు, ఓకే, కొన్ని థియరీస్ని ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ చేసేటప్పుడు రాదర్ మనం థియరీస్ కాంటెంపరీ రిలవెన్స్ గురించి మనం మాట్లాడామనుకోండి, ఇట్ వుడ్ బి వెరీ వెరీ helpful. It would bring a lot of marks. For example, if you're writing about, let's say, John Rawls's theory of justice, you remember what he says, John Rawls? Any idea? Vague idea?
Maximum good to the maximum.
Okay. Maximum good to maximum number. Adi Bentham, utilitarianism, sir. Greatest good of greatest number. John Rawls, what he says is, we should give maximum possible liberty. Maximum possible liberty, one, and whatever benefits additionally that we would want to give, they should be the least advantaged. They should be given to the least advantaged. Okay, now benefits to the least advantaged. Today దీనికి కాంటెంపరీ రిలవెన్స్ మనం ఎస్టాబ్లిష్ చేయాలనుకోండి, a lot of countries across the entire world are providing some special benefits to the least advantaged. We have the scheme of positive discrimination. Even in the most developed countries in the West, they have social security offered to people who are disadvantaged, unemployment allowance ani, okay, shelters ani, ఇట్లాగ social security provisions are being provided for the disadvantaged. So whatever the special benefits are being provided, they should be provided to benefit the least advantaged of the society. అని జాన్ రాల్స్ చెప్తారండి. So to realize justice, this is a principle that we should adopt. Almost all the countries across the entire world are adopting this principle. Almost all the countries across the entire world are adopting this principle. Okay? So providing some form of benefits to the least advantaged is considered to be a part of the idea called justice. That was proposed by John Rawls. అప్పుడు జాన్ రాల్స్ చెప్పిన మాట ఇప్పుడు కాంటెంపరీగా చాలా కంట్రీస్లో అమలు ఉంది, అది రిలవెంట్గా కూడా ఇవాళ ఉంది అని మనం చెప్తాం అనమాట. సో ట్రయింగ్ టు ఐడెంటిఫై కాంటెంపరీ రిలవెన్స్ వేర్ ఎవర్ దెర్ ఈస్ పాసిబిలిటీ, మనకి ప్రతి ఒక్క థింకర్కి కాంటెంపరీ రిలవెన్స్ ఉంటుంది సార్. ఏంటండి ఇది ఇప్పుడు దిస్ యాక్చువల్లీ ఈజ్ ఎస్టాబ్లిష్డ్. జాన్ రాల్స్ ప్రిన్సిపల్ ఆఫ్ జస్టిస్ ఏదైతే ఉందో అది మనం ఎక్కడి నుంచి తీసుకొచ్చి ఇరికిచ్చినట్టు కాదు. దట్ వాస్ జస్ట్ టు మేక్ యూ అండర్స్టాండ్. ప్లాటో అయ్యింది కాబట్టి, ఇది ఇంకా అవ్వలేదు కాబట్టి చెప్పలేదు, అది అయ్యింది కాబట్టి. ఫిలాసఫర్ కింగ్ అంటే ఇట్ ఈస్ జస్ట్ టు ఎస్టాబ్లిష్ ఎ పాయింట్ దట్ పీపుల్ హూ రూల్ షుడ్ బి వర్చువస్, షుడ్ బి నాలెడ్జబుల్, షుడ్ అండర్స్టాండ్ ద రియాలిటీ బెటర్, దే షుడ్ నాట్ బి ఇన్ డ్రీమ్స్, ఓకే, దే షుడ్ నాట్ గివ్ ఇన్ టు దేర్ ప్యాషన్స్ అనేది కదా ద బేసిక్ కాన్సెప్ట్ ఆఫ్ ప్లాటో ఇస్ దిస్, అట్లా. Okay, so if you are able to find contemporary relevance to static theories also, and if you are able to mention that in your answer in a reasonably good way, you shouldn't strategize, మీరు మరీ అన్నట్టుగా ఇరికించకూడదు. ఓకే, సో సమ్వేర్ ఇఫ్ యూ ఆర్ ఏబుల్ టు ఫైండ్ కాంటెంపరీ రిలవెన్స్, మనకి ఆల్మోస్ట్ థింకర్స్ అందరికీ కూడా కాంటెంపరీ రిలవెన్స్ కనిపిస్తుందండి. ఓకే, ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ ద డేంజర్స్ ఆఫ్ అలవింగ్ రిలిజన్ టు ఇన్ఫ్లుయెన్స్ పాలిటిక్స్, ఇట్ కుడ్ లీడ్ టు కమ్యూనలైజేషన్ ఆఫ్ పాలిటిక్స్, isn't it? So Machiavelli stands very tall as far as this principle is concerned. అట్లాగే అనమాట. సో కాంటెంపరీ రిలవెన్స్ని యూ కెన్ ఫైండ్ అవుట్ ఫర్ ఎ గుడ్ నెంబర్ ఆఫ్ థింగ్స్. అండ్ the concepts like security dilemma, have you heard this? I think I told you this about this when we discussed international relations. Can you recall what is the meaning of security dilemma? You feel your security threatened, and therefore you, to be on the safe side, begin to acquire arms and strengthen your military prowess and preparedness. This is called a security dilemma, which also induces the other person to strengthen his military prowess and preparedness. This is what's called as security. ఇప్పుడు మనం ఈ కాన్సెప్ట్ని ప్రజెంట్ వరల్డ్లో ఏదన్నా ఒక రిలేషన్షిప్ని కానీ ఈవెంట్ కానీ ఎస్టాబ్లిష్ చేసినప్పుడు ఈ కాన్సెప్ట్ని మనం తీసుకొచ్చి ఈ కాంటెంపరీ రిలవెన్స్ని ఈ కాన్సెప్ట్కి ఇచ్చామనుకోండి. ఓకే, సెక్యూరిటీ డిలమా గురించి మీరు రాస్తున్నప్పుడు కాంటెంపరీగా ఏదన్నా ఎగ్జాంపుల్ తీసుకుని మీరు ఆ కాన్సెప్ట్ని ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ చేశారనుకోండి, ఇట్ వుడ్ బి వెరీ యూస్ఫుల్. దిస్ ఈస్ హౌ యూ గెట్ మార్క్స్ ఇన్ పొలిటికల్ సైన్స్. యూ ఆర్ షోయింగ్ టు ద ఎగ్జామినర్ దట్ యూ నో ద కాన్సెప్ట్ అండ్ యూ నో ద రిలవెన్స్ ఆఫ్ ద కాన్సెప్ట్. Okay, you know how to apply the concept to the present reality. If you are able to show that, that is the way to get very good score in political science. మనం చదివే చాలా వరకు కరెంట్ ఈవెంట్స్ దే విల్ హ్యావ్ దేర్ అప్లికేషన్ సమ్వేర్ ఇన్ పొలిటికల్ సైన్స్, ఎక్కడో చోట ఉంటుందండి. అది కానీ మనం కరెక్ట్గా ఐడెంటిఫై చేసుకోగలిగి కరెక్ట్గా ఈ నోట్స్లో ఇన్కార్పొరేట్ చేసుకుంటే యూ గెట్ యువర్ స్కోర్స్. ఐ టోల్డ్ యూ పొలిటికల్ సైన్స్ ఈస్ గాట్ పొటెన్షియల్ టు గెట్ యూ 300 స్కోర్. ఇట్స్ గాట్ ఎ వెరీ గుడ్ పొటెన్షియల్. యాక్చువల్గా వేరే జిఎస్లో కూడా కొంచెం అటు ఇటుగా వచ్చినా కూడా పొలిటికల్ సైన్స్లో జాగ్రత్తగా డీల్ చేసి సిలబస్ని జాగ్రత్తగా కంప్లీట్ చేస్తే యూ స్టాండ్ ఎ వెరీ గుడ్ ఛాన్స్ ఆఫ్ క్లియరింగ్ ద మెయిన్స్. ఓకే, political science has that scope provided you incorporate these things and properly understand the question, understand the keywords, understand the directive of the question, incorporate current events, identify contemporary relevance to static theories, organize your answer properly. Okay, so itla cheyagalite you get your scores, right? Next, a lot of students who have got very high scores in political science, okay, where students were able to establish a linkage between syllabus. మనం సెక్షన్ ఏలో ఒకటి చదువుతాం, సెక్షన్ బిలో ఒకటి చదువుతాం. సెక్షన్ ఏలో చదివిన ఏదైనా ఒక కాన్సెప్ట్ని మనం సెక్షన్ బిలో చదువుతున్న కాన్సెప్ట్కి లింకేజ్ చేసుకోగలిగితే, ఓకే, ఎస్టాబ్లిషింగ్ లింకేజ్ బిట్వీన్ సిలబస్. ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్, you study Kautilya in section A, paper 1. Okay, Kautilya chadukunnappudu Kautilya gives a theory called the Mandala Siddhanta. Have you heard that?
No, sir.
Mandala Siddhanta. India's immediate neighbors, okay, a country's immediate neighbors are a country's natural enemies. You know, he says, right? Why? Because they may nurture territorial ambitions against you. They are your immediate neighbors కదా. But they are your natural enemies అంటాడు. మీరు ఎన్ని కథలని చెప్పండి, they are your natural enemies. They may nurture territorial ambitions against you. అట్లాగే your neighbor's neighbor, okay, is his natural enemy and therefore he is your friend. అర్థమైందండి? సో అట్లా you can divide the world into various concentric circles to identify who can be your friend and who can be your potential threat. Got it, sir? Okay, ఇక్కడ ఇండియా ఉంది, ఇండియా చుట్టూ పాకిస్తాన్, చైనా ఉన్నాయి, దేర్ నేబర్స్. ఈ పాకిస్తాన్ చుట్టూత ఆఫ్ఘనిస్తాన్, సెంట్రల్ ఏషియా ఉన్నాయి. ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్, దే బికమ్ అవర్ ఫ్రెండ్స్. సో దెర్ ఈస్ ఎ వెరీ హై పొటెన్షియల్ ఆఫ్ ఆఫ్ఘనిస్తాన్ అండ్ ఇండియా బికమింగ్ ఫ్రెండ్స్ బికాస్ యువర్ నైబర్స్ నైబర్ is your friend. Okay, just as your enemy's enemy is your friend. అర్థమైందండి? వీడు, మనం ఇక్కడ ఉన్నాం ఇండియా, వీడు మనకి ఎనిమి ఎందుకు? హీజ్ అవర్ నైబర్ కాబట్టి. వీడు వీడికి ఎనిమి ఎందుకు? వీడు వీడికి నైబర్ కాబట్టి. నైబర్స్ ఎనిమీస్ ఎనిమీ ఈజ్ యువర్ ఫ్రెండ్. సో యూ కెన్ డ్రా కాన్సెంట్రిక్ సర్కిల్స్ టు ఐడెంటిఫై హూ కెన్ బి యువర్ పొటెన్షియల్ ఫ్రెండ్స్ అండ్ హూ కెన్ బి యువర్ పొటెన్షియల్ ఎనిమీస్ అంటాడు. This is what's called as the Mandala Siddhanta, proposed by Kautilya. So if you're writing something about, let's say, India's relationship with its neighbors, you can use this Mandala Siddhanta and enrich your answer. Got it, sir? So you are using a concept which I have studied in section A, paper 1, and applying it to section B, paper 2. అదే కదా, India and its neighbors, paper 2, section B. కదా? So a concept which you have studied in section A, paper 1, you are applying it to the study of section B, paper 2. This is what's called as interlinkage. If you can establish that, if you can establish linkage between the concepts that you study in various parts of the syllabus. Okay, I told you, right, in political science you have this freedom, sir. Right? You can draw content from various parts of the syllabus. You can use the jargon from various parts of the syllabus to enrich your other answers. Okay, so that you are supposed to do as political science. This is what's called as application of knowledge. Okay, you can properly apply knowledge to enrich your answers and get good scores. Okay, next, sometimes you might have to criticize. Okay, for example, you are attempting a critique, let us say of some specific thing. Okay. So, whenever you are criticizing something, if you can present various perspectives in your criticism, then it would be very, very enriching. మనం క్రిటిసిజం చేసేటప్పుడు జస్ట్ ఒకటో రెండో పాయింట్స్ చెప్పి వాటి మీద ఎలాబరేట్ చేసి రాయకుండా ఒక 3 or 4 పర్స్పెక్టివ్స్, లెట్స్ సే లిబరల్ పర్స్పెక్టివ్, ఓకే, ద ఫెమినిస్ట్ పర్స్పెక్టివ్, ద మార్క్సిస్ట్ పర్స్పెక్టివ్, ఇట్లా రకరకాల పర్స్పెక్టివ్స్ తోటి మన క్రిటిసిజమ్స్ని మనం ప్రజెంట్ చేస్తే దట్ వుడ్ బి వెరీ ఫెచింగ్. ఓకే, సో ఇఫ్ యూర్ ఆస్క్డ్ టు కామెంట్ ఆన్ సంథింగ్, you can use these perspectives to criticize a particular stand. Okay, so this is also another way for you to get good scores in political science, right? And sometimes, you know, there might be questions which are so directive that you might have to improvise on the spot improvisation cheyalsi vastadi. The question that I was referring to earlier, trace the evolution of Western political thought of ancient to contemporary period. 2020 లో అడిగిన క్వశ్చన్ అండి, 2020లో అడిగిన క్వశ్చన్. ఓకే, దిస్ క్వశ్చన్ వాజ్ ఆస్క్డ్ ఫర్ 20 మార్క్స్. ట్రేస్ ద ఇవల్యూషన్ ఆఫ్ వెస్టర్న్ పొలిటికల్ థాట్ ఆఫ్ ఏన్షియంట్ టు ద కాంటెంపరీ పీరియడ్. ఎట్లా ఇవాల్వ్ అయింది, మీరు అక్కడ స్పాట్ ఇంప్రవైజేషన్ చేయాలి, బికాస్ వీ డోంట్ స్టడీ ఫర్ దిస్. కాబట్టే ఐ కెప్ట్ టెలింగ్ యూ నో ద బిగ్ పిక్చర్ ఈజ్ వెరీ ఇంపార్టెంట్. గెటింగ్ ద బిగ్ పిక్చర్ ఈజ్, అందుకని వీ స్టార్టెడ్ డిస్కసింగ్ పొలిటికల్ సైన్స్ బై discussing how it was in ancient period, in the medieval period, in the modern period, kada, and different political thinkers come in between, right? We discussed that in the ancient period political thought was centered around polis, right? And political thought was very strongly or intricately associated with ethics, good life, virtue. These were the terms which frequented political treatises in the ancient period. In the medieval period, political science or political thought was subordinated to religion. Religious principles and religious precepts determined political thought. We had theories like the divine origin theory. Have you heard that? Divine origin theory. And we had theory like the theory of two swords. It was like theories in the medieval period. But political science became subservient to religion. But political science and political thought could not develop in an independent manner. Okay? In the modern times, of course, with Machiavelli, political science finally was liberated from the influence of religion and morality or ethics. Okay? And since then, political science began to chart its own course. So we got the big picture first. So that's important. Okay? Right? Right. So this is how you try to improve on your score in political science. Okay, keep this in mind, sir. All these points, we have taken down these points, I guess, right? Make a note of all these points. Practice with previous year's questions. Okay, so previous year's questions will give you what standard the examiner is actually trying to hit you with, and you also will be exposed to the incidental areas. For example, కొన్ని incidental areas సిలబస్లోనే కొన్ని incidental areas ఉంటాయండి, అవి ఏంటి అనేది మనకి తెలుస్తుంది అన్నమాట. ఓకే, అండ్ థర్డ్, ప్రాక్టీసింగ్ విత్ ద ప్రీవియస్ ఇయర్స్ క్వశ్చన్స్ విల్ allow you to know where your standard is, okay, and what lacuna you have. You get them evaluated properly, get a feedback, try to make amends and improvements, and check your progress. Okay, and if you can do these things properly after having attained proper content, then you get scores of nearly 300 in political science. Okay, so incorporate all these things, they're all very important. So next time when you write an answer, check, make a checklist cheskondi, and make that a habit. That this is important not only for optional, even for general studies also. Okay, even for GS also you can use some of these things that we have spoken about. Optional lo, political science lo, these are sure shot ways for getting good scores. Okay, so this is what I wanted to speak about today. Any doubts? Any doubts, Praneeth? No doubts. Okay, so make a checklist andi. Okay, make a checklist of what you want to చెక్అవుట్ బిఫోర్ యూ రైట్ అన్ ఆన్సర్. అది ఏమవుతుందంటే ఇనీషియల్గా మనకి కొంచెం కష్టమే అవుతుంది. రోజుకి ఒకటి రాయండి చాలు, రోజుకి ఒకటి ప్రాక్టీస్ చేయండి చాలు. ఓకే, చెక్ లిస్ట్ పెట్టుకుని ఇవన్నీ మీరు ఫాలో అవుతున్నారో లేదో చూసుకుంటూ రోజుకి ఒకటి, జస్ట్ వన్. అండ్ మీరే ఒకసారి సెల్ఫ్ ఇవాల్యుయేట్ చేసుకోండి. లేదు తీసుకురండి, ఐ విల్ డూ ఇట్ ఫర్ యూ. ఓకే, విల్ సిట్ 1-to-1 అండ్ బిఫోర్ యూ ఐ విల్ కరెక్ట్ ద స్క్రిప్ట్ అండ్ ఐ విల్ సీ వేర్ యూ ఆర్ ల్యాకింగ్ ఆర్ మిస్సింగ్ అవుట్ ఆర్ వేర్ యూ కెన్ ఇంప్రూవ్. Okay, or where you can be more effective, right? Do that. Apart from this, there are a few more things that you keep in mind, but when you, as you keep writing scripts, I'll be giving you a few more tips on how to improve your scores. Okay, so this for today. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow evening. Tomorrow evening we'll meet at 5 o'clock. Okay, so Karl Marx, yeah, tomorrow we've discussed Karl Marx yesterday, isn't it? So we'll continue with Karl Marx tomorrow. And tomorrow we'll finish off with dialectical materialism and, if possible, materialistic interpretation of history. Both these things we'll try to do tomorrow. Okay? Okay then. Okay, we గుర్తుపెట్టుకోండి ఆన్సర్స్ రాస్తున్నప్పుడు, very important. Okay?